IVM.
Hey everybody, quick request once again, if you could help us out by filling out our survey. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. This really helps us talk to advertisers about the kinds of people listening to these shows. Really do appreciate your help, and we're going to be doing a random drawing, and we'll be sending out some IVM swag. Hope you enjoy that.
Welcome to the show. This round is on me. As the world continues to grapple with the COVID-19 pandemic, the remarkable resilience of India's healthcare industry has been on display. Throughout this period, I've heard many stories of courage from a dear friend, fellow entrepreneur, and someone who has led a diagnostic company being at the forefront of COVID-19 testing, Sanjay Arora. Dr. Sanjay is the founder and MD of Suburban Diagnostics and is known to be the leader in the diagnostics and healthcare industry. He's trained at the esteemed TATA Hospital, Johns Hopkins Hospital, and Henry Ford Hospital in the US. His visionary approach towards women's health has helped bring a change and improve the health outcomes and health indices in our country. He's also a global traveler, amateur chef, travel photographer, and DJ who loves sharing his entrepreneurial journey, experiences, and learnings. Welcome, Dr. Sanjay, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Gauri, thank you so much for having me over.
So, Doctor, obviously, first and foremost, on top of everyone's mind, how was it for you to lead a healthcare company in a global health crisis?
Yeah, so let me just, add one small, I think one of the areas that was missed was that I also studied at JJ Hospital, which was sort of the foundation for my education. And I think a lot of what I learned at JJ Hospital continues to hold me in good stead even today. It teaches you a lot of tricks outside the book. And that environment sort of, continues to add value to whatever I do today. So I think, this whole pandemic situation brought in so much of purpose and pride in the organization, and in me personally, that it allowed us to fulfill our destiny. When you take up a profession of healthcare, you really want to be given an opportunity where you can contribute. And I think there was no better opportunity than this, where, as a leader, as an organization, the sense of pride and purpose to fulfill our destiny was truly realized. And it continues to happen even today. And I think the team really responded extremely well over these last 8 months, where, we had this whole concept of all hands on deck. I think we had more than 90% of our team fully engaged. Everybody put their hand up and said, yes, we want to contribute. And more than 90% of the people actually showed up at work and continue to do so. That, of course, was an display of strong leadership across all verticals, a lot of agility in decision making. We had this whole war room concept, where we got all hands on deck virtually on a war room situation, where there was so much of changes that needed to be made on a daily basis. So all the key stakeholders were brought onto a common platform, like a Zoom platform. And there was lots of agility that was there in this whole decision-making process. And that brought in this whole sense of collaboration within the stakeholders. And all this together, has truly, given us this opportunity to contribute to make a positive difference in this pandemic situation.
That's amazing. And, as you said, I think agility is the word of the day these days, because nobody really could have seen this coming. But I think some companies were better prepared than others. How do you think Suburban was in terms of its preparedness for something like this?
Right. I think sometimes, I don't want to use the word luck really, but I guess maybe gut feel, intuition plays. So we had invested in this technology of molecular diagnostics about 5 years ago, because we knew that's the future of healthcare is going to be in the molecular diagnostics. And even though we did not have a lot of workload, we went ahead with the best quality of accreditation, which allowed us to do H1N1 testing when that happened a few years ago. So when the government of India wanted to select labs for COVID testing, they selected only those labs that were accredited and were doing H1N1 testing. So I guess that groundwork of what we had been doing over the last few years actually allowed us to, be prepared for this pandemic. But more importantly, when we started with this whole journey, we were doing maybe 50 or 100 tests a day. But the biggest learning that happened was on the job, so to say, to go from 50, 100 tests a day to 4,500 tests a day was a very steep learning curve for the whole organization over the last 6 months. And that is perhaps the thing that I'm maximum proud of, is the way in which the team truly evolved its learning and its thinking, its decision making, its, making mistakes, going back, but continuing to evolve. So from 50, 100 tests a day to 4,500 tests a day within a period of 6 months, great learning for all of us.
I mean, absolutely. That's incredible. And I think, as you said, in our kind of industries, service industries, it's all about the people, right? It's really comes down to our teams and our people are everything.
Right.
And as a leader, entrepreneur, I'm sure that you also faced a lot of challenges, especially when it came to the people practices. I know for us, for example, there was a huge amount of fear for to start with, and
right.
We also are with the food business, we are also in a position where we can't really do anything without our team, and being able to sort of motivate and reassure them about coming back to work was, I think, the biggest challenge for me personally. So how did you manage to tackle issues such as staff availability, safety, even motivation, considering unlike in our case, your team was actually sort of at the front line and facing this as up close and personally as possible. So how did you manage your people?
Absolutely. Great question. And you have hit it on the head that service industry truly depends on its people. And I truly believe that if we look after our people, people will eventually look after the customer. So I think a lot of focus from our team went into looking after our people. And like I mentioned earlier, that more than 90% of the people actually contributed and put their hand up and said, yes, we want to be a part of this. So I think what we realize is people truly want to make a difference if they're given the opportunity. What was a challenge was that there was no transportation available earlier. It was a lockdown. Fortunately, because we are the essential services, we were allowed to, so we had to actually organize minibuses and taxis. We had about 6 or 7 routes applying from 5 in the morning, where we were picking up people from their houses and bringing them to our lab and then taking them back home. And as the workload started to increase, we had to identify hotels close by to our place of work, so where we could accommodate our staff safely. That was one part. But as you mentioned about the fear aspect, our team was the one who was actually going out to collect the samples of all COVID suspect cases. There was a lot of apprehension, a lot of fear, but I think when the first technician volunteered, when our procurement team ensured that we got them the right PPE, which was reassuring for them that this is as per international standards. When the first technician volunteered, I think it was a chain reaction. Then more and more people started to volunteer. 2 became 4, and finally we had more than 100 people who volunteered to be part of this, what we call as COVID warriors, who went out to collect the samples. And then ensuring that our lab, the molecular lab team, also is well protected, has the right safety protocols, increasing the number of staff in the molecular lab, because if we had to go from 50 to 4,500, we needed to. So flexibility of staffing was a big opportunity, and our paramedical training institute, which we have invested in, was a big help at this point of time, where a lot of these young kids again had this clarity that they want to contribute. So being able to rapidly increase the number of people, flexibility in that staffing was a big support for us. And I remember when our first team member tested positive. Again, a lot of chaos, a lot of fear, a lot of confusion. In fact, some of our senior leadership team members also tested positive. And at that time, I think communicating with the team, our COO actually communicated with the team when he was in hospital, despite being positive, just to reassure them that, there's no big deal. I'm positive, I'm in hospital, but I'm still able to speak to you. So I think being with the team when it really mattered, shoulder to shoulder, sort of brought in a lot of confidence in the team that it can happen to all of us, but we can all overcome. And just to tell you for record that we had over 100 people who have tested positive, and each and every one of them has recovered and has come back to work.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, and it's not just actually in this situation, it's not just about the teams, but it's also their families, right? Because these are people back home. And, I know we had one of our staff members who, his wife is a nurse, and she tested positive, and before you knew it, the rest of the family at home had tested positive. And, but they sort of took it in their stride, did what they needed to do, and, bounced back. But there's, I think that there's still a lot of, at least in the early days, there was a lot of sort of stigma and fear around it. So in your case also, I'm sure it extended beyond just your immediate team as well.
Absolutely. I think great point you made that we had a separate team of doctors. We call it as a COVID task force, whose role was only to answer queries of our staff and their family members. And we looked at the family members in the same way as we looked after our staff. So there was no difference. We wanted to make sure that it's, the families felt that sense of connect with us and they felt reassured. So if somebody in the family needed testing or needed hospitalization or needed any kind of support, our COVID task force looked at the family just as if they would look into our team members. And I think that brought in a lot of reassurance. We also made sure that everybody got, at that time, hydroxychloroquine was the drug that was needed to be given to all COVID warriors. So we went out and procured that. We even spoke to some homeopaths who gave us some homeopathy tablets and pills, which we could give to our team members. So whatever were the measures that our team could take to reassure our staff, I think that was done. And I think family truly said, good point that they played a big role. Once they felt reassured, they also felt that, yes, it's okay to let my family member work.
Yeah. So, talking about the industry now, the diagnostics industry, what should be the role of the diagnostics industry, in the COVID and post-COVID world? I mean, what has been your sort of biggest learning from this as a sort of leading company in the diagnostics industry?
Sure. So just to, put a fact first that diagnostics impacts 70% of decision-making in health outcomes or medical outcomes. 70% of decisions are impacted by diagnostics, and that comes at less than 10% of the overall cost to the patient. Now, that was exemplified, amplified in this whole pandemic. I think the kind of focus that diagnostics has got today has never been seen in the past, where everything depended on that PCR test that we had to do. So the focus on diagnostics, unfortunately, came because of the wrong reasons, but nevertheless, there is the right kind of focus. So today, diagnostics is in the limelight for the right reasons. And the fact is that diagnostics spans the entire health continuum of an individual. If you look at treatment only looks at that one therapy part, whereas if you look at diagnostics, you look at prevention, you look at screening, of course, diagnosis of the condition, but you also look at risk stratification. And after treatment, you also can look at monitoring. So the entire health continuum of an individual is impacted by diagnostics. And that is the role that diagnostic strives to play today and even in the future. That today, if you look at, you want to diagnose a patient, you will get the PCR test done. But you also want to monitor the patient. You will check whether he or she has developed antibodies. And then if you want to continue to monitor, you will check what is the level of antibodies. Are the antibodies going up or going down? So that is the impact diagnostics can play. And I think diagnostics will play a big role once vaccination is out, because the measure of success of vaccination is the presence of antibodies. Again, that's an outcome of diagnostics. So I mean, right place at the right time, so to say. But I think diagnostics, finally, not just diagnostics, I think overall healthcare is getting its just rewards or just dues, for being there when it mattered to humanity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think normally when one thinks of healthcare, you think hospitals, and diagnostics is kind of that almost that sort of stepchild.
Yes, absolutely.
But your interactions that you sort of a big believer in sort of preventive healthcare and the annual health checkup,
Right.
the importance of the annual health checkup. So I hope that that's kind of been given a boost and being pushed into sort of the limelight as far as its importance is concerned as a result of all this situation we find ourselves in. What I want to also ask you is that you spent time in the US before you set up your business here in India, and it's the US tends to be the front runner when it comes to a lot of things, especially healthcare. What's your take on how the difference in the standards of diagnostic care between India and the US? I mean, we keep hearing about what's going on there as far as COVID is concerned, and but it's also where we look to for progress and sort of developments that are happening in the space. So how do you kind of compare India with the US as far as diagnostics is concerned?
No, I think US has that position or place of being a leader in healthcare for the right reasons, I think, justly. But I think there are a lot of good things that India does as well. So if you were to look at the quality of care that we get in India, perhaps is second to none. The only challenge is that it is limited. The access of quality healthcare is limited in India, unlike in the US, where I think it is a lot more democratized. It's a lot, decentralized. Access to quality healthcare probably is more universal in USA as compared to India. I think so. That's where the challenge is. So, if you were to just compare quality-wise, we use the same kits in India that they use in the US. In fact, there are certain things we picked up in India because of the kind of diversity of population here, or the way in which we look at testing. Certain kits which we don't use in India were being used in the US, and they found out eventually that those kits are not good to be used. So sometimes, I think India can also give up data and feedback which perhaps the other countries don't know. But I think quality-wise, we equate. It's just about distribution that we need to work on. Pricing, I think we offer the same quality at maybe 1/10 the price. And COVID being an example here, people who are not insured in the US pay up to $400 for a test. Whereas, we are paying, even at peak times, we were paying $50. Of course, now the test is available at $20 or $15 in India. So I think, and we use the same kits that is used in the US. So I think pricing, there's no comparison out there. I think where the other big challenge or the gap that I see is the gap in skill. I think India still needs to bridge that gap in skilled manpower. I think in the US, paramedical profession is not it's almost like a looked upon opportunity for people. It's not something as a default, whereas in India, it's still evolving. People look at paramedical education or paramedical profession as something which is left out if you don't get anything else. You want to be a doctor is still aspirational. But after that, every doctor needs a support of 9 paramedical staff. So how do we make paramedical as a profession more aspirational? I think that's the opportunity we seek. And also, how do we create skilling in that area? Because then it will become more aspirational. So I think, that's the gap that I see today. And if we bridge this gap, I think this whole opportunity of penetration of healthcare across the country will also see a big impact. So what we need is more skilled healthcare professionals, which will then allow the democratization of healthcare also to happen.
Absolutely. So, the pandemic has put the spotlight on preventive healthcare, as we discussed earlier. making it a necessity for diagnostic labs to design innovative and cost-effective health checkup packages, which, again, we talked about earlier. You've been a big sort of proponent of that. And, obviously the idea is that goes a long way to nipping the onset of a major health threat, nipping it in the bud. So do you see, IT being a driver of innovation and growth as the world emerges from this crisis?
Absolutely. I think the role of IT in any industry has been accelerated, in every industry, and healthcare is, not to be left behind in that. What we are trying to do right now, as you very correctly said about, making preventive healthcare more accessible. Today you can go to a pizza place, and you will relate to this more than anybody else, and you can choose how to make your own pizza. You can decide what base you want, whether you want deep dish or you want thin crust, and you want what type of cheese and what type of toppings, and etc., etc. We are trying to make that same concept in health checkups, that design your own health checkup, create your own health checkup. You come onto our website and you give your parameters that I am 40-year-old female, and this is my height, this is my weight, this is my family history, and then I want to do. So then the algorithm will actually prompt you. So we don't want to have a one-size-fits-all approach. And healthcare is becoming that, actually. So one of the biggest changes that's going to happen because of technology is that healthcare will become personalized. What works for you, Gauri, may not work for me, and what works for me may not work for anybody else. So this big change that is going to happen is, today everything is personalized. You go onto Amazon and they know what your choices are. It's personalized. So same thing, we want to make sure that we personalize the offerings, the products, the services which suit the individual from their background and their choice. And that's probably going to be the biggest impact that IT will play. Is one, it will make it personalized. Second, it will democratize. I think this whole India has this big urban-rural gap. I think penetration of healthcare will be a big impact because we can democratize this. Big changes that will happen because of IT will, a lot of point of care delivery systems will happen. Today we do a glucometer at home, to check blood sugars. But a lot more point of care devices will be into the market soon. Home health will see a big impact because of technology. Now, the Uberization, so to say, Uberization has become a verb now. So the Uberization of healthcare will happen. So you can just order home health, at the click of a button. So all that will happen. Eventually, we want to make sure that, we evolve the technologies, which is the molecular diagnostics or genetic testing, make that more accessible, make it, like I said, more personalized. And we see a future where eventually, you'll have a chip embedded in your forearm where a real-time, measure of your vital parameters are uploaded to a cloud. And eventually the doctor has real-time access of your health status. So, health on a chip is going to become a reality in the next, I would say 5 years.
Wow.
So that's the way healthcare is actually going to progress. So I think, and all that has got accelerated because of this pandemic. So I think all good things are going to happen.
That's crazy. I should have paid attention in those sci-fi movies, which this is beginning to sound a bit like. But wow, that's really amazing. And I think you're absolutely right about the personalized, that the home care, because again, that's been exacerbated during this period where people aren't comfortable stepping out or, and they want someone to come home instead. And this is not just going to be restricted to COVID testing, but, services at large, healthcare services at large. So I definitely see that, and I know, again, that Suburban did a lot in that space during this lockdown. But I want to ask you something, taking a step back, again, sort of going a bit deeper into this preventive healthcare space. Why do you feel, given that so much can be prevented from this early diagnosis, why do you still think that, and I don't know if this is something that's restricted to Indians or, this is a trend worldwide, but why do you think that people are still so, for want of a better word, lazy about doing their
Right.
And your health
Reactive. The word is
when,
reactive.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think I would not say lazy. I think the real reason is healthcare in India is out of pocket. Healthcare as an expense is an out of pocket expense for Indians today. If you look at unfortunately, the public health sector today has been found woefully short of being able to manage what is the expectations. And I think the amount of spend that the government makes towards healthcare is extremely low today. It can only get better, and it will get better. So as the public health services become better, as access to quality health becomes better, I think health will also become a bigger priority. So today health becomes a lower priority because it's an out of pocket expense. You have other bigger expenses to look after, so you don't really, and you take health for granted, not realizing that if you have health, health can be a huge enabler for anything and everything in life today. And I think if you look at the market segments today, less than 10% of the market is ill, but more than 90% of the market is well. So the idea is, how do we get this focus of illness to wellness? I think that's the opportunity that is there today, that let's help people remain well rather than addressing them when they are ill. I think that's the change that we want to drive, is that focus on the wellness segment, focus on helping people remain well, go to the doctor to remain healthy, not when you fall ill. And I think that life cycle change in healthcare access is what we want to evangelize and what we want to project, that, use healthcare proactively to remain healthy. Don't use healthcare only when you fall ill. So it's like saying, do a test, not only when you fall ill, do a test not to fall ill.
Sure. No, and I definitely, like you said, I think technology is going to play a huge part in this, because people were already getting more digitally savvy, in the last few years, but the last 6 months, 7 months during COVID, it's been, it's like sort of digital savviness is like, shot through the roof just out of necessity.
Right.
And, I'm seeing this even in our business, whether it comes to ordering in, whether it comes to, making online payments, because we're sort of trying to stay away from cash payments, and,
right.
Everything, like from delivery, like the mode of delivery to the, ordering process to payment process, like every aspect of it is getting digitized. And, you sort of touched on this earlier, and if we can sort of talk a little bit more about specific trends, that you see coming up, sort of, obviously one you mentioned is about a chip, but even something sort of, sooner than that, and where India sort of stands in terms of adapting them. So, for example, telehealth services,
Right.
I know that, like I mentioned, people are sort of, finding alternatives to going to a doctor. And so how does this work for, is this something that's here to stay, where you kind of do your, is it really possible to do this when, we've all been used to a doctor sort of taking our pulse and checking our eyes and things like this? Like how do you see this sort of progressing?
Like I mentioned earlier, this point of care or home health, these are all now IoT enabled. So you wear a chip around your wrist, or you have a point of care device. It has an IoT connectivity, and it sort of gets uploaded to a cloud, and people have access to that. So it's no longer isolated, or it's in a silo that you need to manually record anything. It's all tech enabled today. But I think the government has realized the importance of quality healthcare. And one step they have done, as you know about technology, is they have started this National Digital Health Mission. The idea is to create a unique health ID for every citizen of our country.
Wow.
And that will mean that you as an individual will have a unique ID, which will then enable all your medical records, access to. So if you're traveling across the country, you just put that unique ID, and the doctor in Patna tomorrow will be able to access your records in Mumbai and know what was your background. So it becomes standardized as a access point. So I think that is, a great starting point for us when the National Digital Health Mission is trying to make health access standardized across the country. And by giving, like we have an Aadhaar card, I think that's a great starting point. Similarly, that will get translated into a unique health ID for every individual, where you will have access to your health records, electronic health data across the country in a standardized manner. So if I do a test today in Mumbai, or I do a test tomorrow in Chennai, the same test codes will be used, the same processes will be used. So you will get that standardization. I think that is a great starting point to bring about uniformity in health access across the country. That I think will make a big difference. And as you said about telehealth, we spoke about it earlier, that this whole gap between urban and rural, where we find most of the healthcare services, quality healthcare services in the urban areas, whereas most of the population is in the rural areas. So I think telehealth will bridge that gap extremely well. And we spoke earlier about skilling. I think if we can make healthcare profession more aspirational, that's the gap in skilling. So National Skill Development Corporation, things like that will make a big difference to enable skilling in healthcare sectors, which will again bridge this gap between the urban and rural, access of healthcare.
Okay, and this is something that you see sort of happening in the sort of short to medium term in India.
So the National Digital Health Mission is already rolled out. There is a separate team that is already working. They had a webinar. They invited all key stakeholders of the healthcare industry to give their feedback. And the person, I forget his name, who was anchoring that event, patiently heard questions for over 2 hours after that, his session, noting down every feedback and working on that. So I think the government is very serious in making this happen.
Okay. And you mentioned also about obviously skilling, enough people to produce enough, doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals. How do you see that issue being tackled in India?
So like I said, we have our own paramedical training institute. The idea was, when we wanted to expand Suburban Diagnostics, we knew that, as you said earlier, people is
create your own sort of employee pool in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So our idea was to have a backward integration where we create a pipeline of quality paramedical staff, so that we just sort of plug and play. But the biggest challenge we saw was recruitment. How do we recruit people to think that paramedical as a profession is something that they can aspire for? It's still not in that mind. So I think first is to make that aspirational, make people know that, becoming a nurse or becoming an X-ray technician or becoming a blood collection phlebotomist or a lab technician or a dialysis technician or a OT staff, these are all paramedical staff that is required. Now, these have significant opportunities first, and the importance is that these jobs can then make a big difference to society. So I think that whole communication piece is what we are all trying to work towards, is how do we make that aspirational. And I think the National Skill Development Corporation is actually doing that. That healthcare skilling is a separate vertical within NSDC. And I think there are different segments across the country that are only looking at healthcare skilling as an opportunity today. And they're focused only on that. So I think it's clearly, I have seen great progress over the last 5 years that we have started our own institute, and we continue to see progress in that.
Yeah, and I think that this is something that could apply to any industry, honestly, where there's like a shortage of, skilled labor in that field.
Right.
Including ours, which is that, it's a very similar thing that until I would say about 5 years ago, being a chef was not necessarily the most respectable job. It was almost something that you just did if you couldn't, do anything else, or you didn't get in anywhere else. And today, I think chefs get paid more than I do in running the business, and they're sort of celebrities in their own right. But I think it's about creating a respect for that profession. And,
yes.
sort of, I agree with you that as diagnostics gets a larger sort of importance in the larger healthcare industry, it's bound to sort of have a ripple effect on people.
Yeah, I'll just like to share one story on this. You mentioned that chefs get paid more than a person like you. So sometimes it's a matter of pride when somebody in your team actually gets paid more than you, the way I look at it. And the technicians, the ones who are actually going out to collect samples, also needed to be incentivized. Otherwise, so we got such lovely stories where their salaries may have been about 30,000 rupees a month, but they earned over 2 lakh rupees in incentives in a month. And so many stories came out that today I gifted my mother a new television. Today I gifted my brother a motorcycle. So, we were able to, via this, we were able to fulfill so many dreams of these youngsters. And that sense of pride that, today I'm in a profession that can not only make a difference, but I can actually take care of my family as well. So those stories were very, very heartwarming for us.
Yeah. So, Doc, I'm going to move a bit more into the personal space because, like you said, there's, you have come across so much sort of, there's so much inspiration around you. You've seen so many challenges and come out on the other side. So there's so much to learn from you, honestly. I think that this COVID situation presented a challenge on a scale that's never been sort of seen before. And, I know that not just for in your industry, but across the board, put people under a lot of pressure. And so sort of, whether because of COVID or generally, I'm sure you're sort of faced with huge amounts of work pressure on a regular basis. How do you deal with stress, and how do you sort of try and create a sense of balance in your life?
Well, thank you, Gauri. I think stress, pressure, these are all outcomes of modern living, if I can call it that. Current. So I look at it slightly differently. I think a little bit of stress, a little bit of pressure is always good. It keeps you alert. It keeps you on your toes. I believe that life is like a boxing match. And if people follow boxing, you have two hands up. It's called keeping your guard up. If you are a right-handed person, your left hand sort of, is to jab, and the right hand actually is to like a defense. And you keep your guard up to keep yourself from getting punched. And if you have a little bit of pressure, a little bit of stress, I think you are able to keep your guard up. And I think it's important that you keep that trigger in your life that, remain alert so that your guard remains up. Because if you don't remain alert and your guard goes down, you are going to get punched in your face. So I think a little bit of stress and pressure is always good. Keep your guard up. But I think there are ways to release stress. And, chatting with friends like you is a great stress buster for me. You are a huge inspiration. You are a huge motivation. And I mentioned that to you in the past as well, not just because we're talking today, but that I've got my girls connected to you. So you are truly an inspiration. And talking to friends like you is a great stress buster. But for me, I think what works the best is exercise. And it's scientifically proven, so I work out 3 days a week with my trainer. He comes online. We do a video, consultation, so to say, for exercise. He's my personal trainer over video. But, he is ruthless. And that 1 hour, 10 minutes that he works out, best time of my day. I mean, you just feel so good after that. So I think I would encourage everybody to bring exercise as a part of your daily routine. I go cycling every Sunday. That's a great stress buster for me. Early morning, 6 o'clock, I'm out. So at least 4 to 5 days a week, exercise becomes a great start to my day. Music for me is a great stress buster. I'm a huge music fan. So music plays in my house, 3-4 hours every day. So music of all kinds. And, I curate music playlists and I share it with my friends every Sunday. So that, gives me a lot of creativity inside. Cooking, I love cooking. And again, inspired by people like you. So cooking is a great stress buster for me. So, just spending time with your family sometimes. So I make sure that I have a movie night with my entire family. I asked my mom, who's recently turned 80, that what is it that you want from me? She said, I need 10 minutes every day with you. So now I make sure that I watch one episode every few days with her. Just, it makes her feel happy, makes me feel happy. So I think we find our own ways to take care of stress. So these are some of my ways,
I have to get the next Saas Bahu update from you, huh?
No. So we don't watch that. So we don't watch any of those serials that my mom watches alone. So currently we are watching, the Scam, Harshad Mehta's Scam. Yeah. So, and my mom is telling me, agla episode kab dekhenge hum, so she's quite excited. I watched a movie with her called Two Popes. And if people have not seen that, watch it. So I'm also trying to find movies that both of us can watch together. There's an old movie that we watched together called Runaway Train, and that was a movie that did not get its due because it was released at the same time when The Rain Man by Dustin Hoffman came out. But Runaway Train is a great movie to watch, and my mom really enjoyed it. So sometimes, your parents can surprise you with their critical inputs, So yeah, I think find a genre that works for both of you. Saas Bahu is definitely not one of them.
Doc, we all like to think and analyze about how our life is unfolding and how we define success, and I think it's something that evolves over the years as we sort of go through life. How has it been for you? What's your current idea of success?
That's a tough question, Gauri. I think, articulating what is success so I'll put it into three different buckets. So for me, if you were to ask me as a one-line answer, what is success? Success for me is adding value to people. So for me, if I feel that today I could improve someone's life, even one person, that for me is a successful day. It's a happy day for me. So I think adding value to people is my single definition of success. But if I was to step back and look at, maybe from the business point of view, I think getting that kind of recognition or acknowledgement from your peers or from industry that, yes, this is a quality place, this is a good center, they do good quality work. So there's a business success. But I guess the bottom line for me is, medical success, that, we were able to make a difference. We were able to contribute in what I call is impacting health outcomes. If we are able to impact the health outcomes, we can facilitate a doctor to practice better. We can facilitate a patient to get well. We can help humanity remain healthier. What I call is health indices, that if we can impact not just the economic indices, but also the health indices, that I believe is, for me, going to be the true definition of success. That because of our work, we were making a difference in somebody's life, and we could have a measure to that. That for me would be success.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think, I'm sort of younger and at an earlier stage of my business and my entrepreneurial journey. And for me right now, honestly, I think I define it as something, being able to do something that I love.
Sure.
I think sort of just finding that sort of getting to that place where I'm doing something that I truly love is big sort of personal success for me. And then hopefully, as I get to sort of, I completely see what you're saying, where I can start sort of giving back to people. I think that would be, that's the next sort of stage for me personally.
No, I think it's the same thing, Gauri, in a way. I think, the definition of success is probably equated also with happiness. And, at every stage of your life, your parameters for happiness also change. So I think happiness is equal to success, or success is equal to happiness. I think that's the way I look at it. What gives you happiness today is success. And tomorrow, your criteria for happiness can change, and that will change your criteria for success. So I think what makes you happy internally is, I think, what should be success according, and I think you're doing the right thing by doing what makes you happy. That's a great definition of success according to me. So well done, I think.
Every crisis poses an opportunity to learn, improve, innovate. And I know for one, I'll hopefully come out of this crisis changed for the better somehow. What has been sort of some of your learnings from this crisis that we're hopefully going to come out of this.
Right. No, I think the biggest learning for me has been to learn to appreciate the the sense of gratitude, being thankful, being appreciative. That appreciate the little things in life that we all take for granted. We take so many things for granted. I think it's just about learning to appreciate, learning to preserve what is good. I think we've been given a great chance to clean up this planet and preserve the good of it. So I'm finding ways how we can do that. I think continuing to learn. That's been one of my biggest takeaways during the last time, is that continue to learn, but also share your knowledge. So I'm undergoing this coaching with world-renowned gurus like Marshall Goldsmith, but I'm making it my mission to pass on that knowledge to people. So I'm learning, but I'm also sharing that. I think I've also learned the importance of having good health. I think the focus on good health has been the highest today, and I think better late than never. Learn to take care of yourself. And last but not the least is, I think we all complicate our lives too much. I think what I've learned is just simplify your life a little bit. I think we try and overcommit to too many things. I think it's just about trying to simplify your life.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Meanwhile, I launched a podcast in the middle of all of this. So much for uncomplicating life.
But then you are
have these great conversations. So
no, you are sharing this with so many people who are benefiting from your conversation. So I think great initiative. and you know that I'm a big fan of you. So so I'm.
Thank you.
I really enjoy what you do.
So finally, we've entered the last segment of our show, Doc, which is the rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask you a few questions to say the first thing that comes to mind. What are you most proud of?
I think today I'm most proud of that we were the first lab in the country to be given the opportunity to do COVID testing, and we have tested over 5 lakh patients, and we've been able to help 5 lakh patients get better diagnosed and better treated. So I think at this point of time, my pride comes from being able to add value in this very challenging time. I'm really proud of that.
That's amazing. Who have been your role models or mentors?
I'm speaking to one, so I look up to you, Gauri, a lot, and but I think those keep changing. So I think the one constant in my life has been my father. He's a young man at 85, and he's probably the wisest man or the wisest person I've come across. Always pragmatic, always has a solution to any problem. So he remains to be my anchor, my go-to person, the wind beneath my wings. I am here purely because of the vision that my father has shown me. But I think I have so many other mentors, like my teachers, across my health, the medical education. But I think these keep evolving. So I think we keep finding new mentors and, new people to look up to. I have a new mentor that, I'm looking at, a friend of mine who is part of that coaching program with Marshall Goldsmith. He's Paul Dupuy, and, even though I have not met him physically, but I think he's coming out to be a great role model for so many, a great leadership role model. So I think the more people you meet, you'll find inspiration in people all around you every time.
Of course. What's your go-to comfort food?
That's easy. That's very easy.
Really?
It's very.
I have a long list.
It's an omelette sandwich.
Wow.
And Anju, my wife, knows that. That I may be a fussy eater. I may be picky, but finally, if there isn't anything to my liking, she'll say, "Can I make you an omelette sandwich?" And I'll be happy. So that's easy. I can eat omelette sandwich.
The best omelette sandwich is on the train.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I totally agree. And I love omelette sandwich. In fact, I had one this morning as well. So,
Doc, I know you love cooking. So what's the one thing that your family always asks you to cook on repeat?
So every Sunday, actually, or every alternate Sunday at least, I think I make very good waffles and pancakes from scratch. And I'm happy to invite, the owner of the table to come and do a food tasting once, because that would be a real validation for my cooking skills. But no, Gauri, I'd love to invite you. I think I make very good waffles and pancakes, and that's a repeat request from my family, from my friends. I make a very good apple pie. So that's another repeat request I get from my friends. So happy to,
Ever ready to be your guinea pig, though. So if not a doctor or entrepreneur, what would you have been?
Okay.
Would you be?
Yeah. So, I never wanted to do health. I never wanted to become a doctor, actually. I wanted to do something in sports. Sports is my, big, huge passion. I wanted to be a Formula One race driver.
Wow.
But I guess, yeah. So, but I guess at this point of time, I'm really looking at, music. So a combination of food, music, and photography. So open a restaurant called the 5 Dish Cafe, because I only know how to make 5 things, play the music that I love, be my own DJ out there, and put up photographs of the places that I've traveled. So that would be like a good combination for me.
Okay, here's some unsolicited advice. Don't open a restaurant. Oh, God.
Take it.
The best investment you've made in your journey?
So right before I started Suburban, as you mentioned, that I trained in the US, this Dr. Sudha Kiddy, who is a world-renowned expert in biopsy of the thyroid gland, I trained under her in the US. And she told me that I will train you only on one condition, that you buy a microscope of my choice so that you can use the skills that you've learned with me. So when I came back, I purchased this microscope 27 years ago. It cost me almost 1.75 lakhs at that time. That microscope continues to be with me till date. It's like an extension of my body. It is my most prized and most cherished investment that I made. My team knows it. I have my daily ritual with my microscope. They call the microscope my girlfriend, or Mashuka, because the way I clean the microscope, the way I spend time with her, so to say. But the biggest pride for me today, Gauri, is that my younger daughter just started her residency in pathology at TATA Hospital. So the day she got selected to TATA Hospital, I brought that microscope and I gifted it to her. And she was all teary-eyed because she knows that what this microscope really means to me. But I feel that, it's going into much better hands, who will be able to carry on this legacy of adding value to people. And the first day she went to TATA Hospital, she saw the book written by Dr. Kinney. And that was like a sign, the circle coming round, that Dr. Kinney blessed me and she taught me to buy the microscope. I gave her the microscope and she saw Dr. Kinney. So it was like, the circle going all the way around. So I think meant to be. So that perhaps is my best investment ever.
Amazing. Well, speaking of sort of daughters, what would be your message to the young leaders today?
So I've made a lot of mistakes, and I think I would like to share some of them. That the biggest mistake as a leader we make is that we want to prove we are right. But actually the role of a leader is make an impact. So it's important that we realize the difference, that we are not here as a leader to prove that you're right, but you're here to make a positive impact. So keep that one thing in mind, I guess. I think remaining humble is very important. Remain curious and be a constant learner, because, learning never stops. Keep upgrading your skills, keep upgrading your knowledge. Read at least one book a month, and keep your feet firmly planted on the ground.
Doc, this has been hugely inspirational and informative, and I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I'm looking forward to breakfast at yours very soon.
Absolutely.
And, thank you again so much.
No, thank you, Gauri. I think you have done so many podcasts, and I was thinking to myself, do I even qualify to be on Gauri's list? So I'm so glad I made it to that list. I'm so thrilled. I'm thrilled to be being able to share my thoughts with you. So thank you for doing this for me, Gauri. Really, it's made me feel good about myself today.
Well, you made me feel good about myself. So,
well, that's what it's all about, helping each other feel good about each other. I think. So thank you again, Gauri. Thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Chip or no chip in our body, one thing is for sure. My conversation with Dr. Sanjay today has highlighted yet again the importance of healthcare, and for us to all be looking after ourselves. It's more important now than ever before. And if nothing else, I hope that you will take away from our conversation today to look after yourselves, eat well, stay well, and stay healthy. I hope you enjoyed tuning in today. And if you like this show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM Podcast Network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcasts app or website or wherever else you get your podcasts from. You can also follow us on social media. We're at IVM Podcasts on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to me, I'm at gdevidyal on Instagram and at Gauri Details on Twitter.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Once again, just a quick reminder, please do help us out by filling out our survey. It's at ivmpodcast.com/survey. It really does help us figure out who's listening and, what are the characteristics that we can go and push to advertisers. That is massively helpful to us. Please, please, please do help out with that. So, on the network this week, let me start with a quick milestone. It's the 100th episode of Begin the Journey with Ashish Vidyarthi. Congratulations to Ashish and the team. Great show. If you're not listening to it, he talks to you about just how to approach life. It's just very, very cool stuff. Do check this out. Want to mention the note with Maruk Inayat. She talks about why petrol prices are so high. On the Wire Talk, Siddharth speaks with Harsh Mandar. On Advertising is Dead, Varun speaks to Kabir Biswas, the founder of Dunzo. They have a really interesting conversation about, what's the future of Dunzo and what they're thinking about. On the Traveling Professor's Diaries, check out Siddharth talk about the performance paradox. I found it really fascinating and interesting. I think that you guys will really get something out of listening to that. Please do give that a listen. And finally, let me mention Zindagi Diaries. It's Ragini Kumar's poetry podcast. The first week when it came out, we put out 5 poems first week. We put out another 5 poems this week, and the response has been phenomenal. Do check it out. It's in Hindi. It's a poetry podcast. Something a little different. Do give it a shot and let us know what you think. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
2020 is a difficult year. A global pandemic, protests, elections, recessions. You get the picture. What we need is a space where we can have nuanced discussions about global affairs and foreign policy. That's where I come in. My name is Hamsini Hariharan and I host the States of Anarchy podcast. Every second Tuesday, I speak to experts in the field of international relations to make a little more sense of the world. So join me on the IVM Podcast app, website, or wherever you're listening to me right now.